Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. And now, Tider Insider TV.
Welcome, everybody, into the latest edition of Tider Insider Television. I'm Gary Harris, WVOA 23 Sports Director, sitting across the studio from TiderInsider.com's Rodney Orr as we continue during this pandemic to work at a safe social distance here in our studio. Well, we were all pumped up about Alabama LSU previewing the game and, the possibility of Alabama getting a little payback. But now we've learned, of course, that the game has been postponed due to a COVID-19 outbreak in the LSU football program. That announcement coming from the Southeastern Conference today. Also, Texas A&M at Tennessee postponed, and Auburn and Mississippi State had already been postponed this week as cases are continuing to rise for the LSU players who we believe many of them were exposed after they got back from the loss at Auburn at a Halloween party over the bye week. But head coach Ed Orgeron would not specify how many players had contracted COVID-19, but you know this, the scholarship minimum to play a game is 53 with at least one quarterback, so you have to assume that LSU does not have 53 healthy scholarship players to play this Saturday evening at 5 o'clock at Tiger Stadium. Now here is the official announcement from the Southeastern Conference Twitter account. Quote, the Alabama at LSU and Texas A&M at Tennessee football games on November 14th are postponed due to positive test, contact tracing, and subsequent quarantine of individuals within the LSU and A&M football programs. All right, that's a direct quote from the SEC. You see it there on your screen. Let me bring Rodney in because I want to be careful here how we approach this. I know a lot of Alabama fans are frustrated. I get it. Alabama was a 22, 23-point favorite. There's absolutely no reason to believe that this game would have even been competitive. So I know Alabama fans want to play. And I know there's this feeling of, well, LSU doesn't want to play the game. But let's be clear on this. The Auburn-Mississippi State game already postponed yesterday. A&M and Tennessee postponed today. There's strict protocols in place. And whether LSU wanted to play the game or not, if they fall below that 53 limit, they don't really have a choice. It's taken out of their hands. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that, Rodney. I understand Alabama's a better football team than LSU, but I think had there been enough scholarship players to have played the game would have been played.
Yeah. Well, certainly, no question about that. And I think part of the problem, too, Gary, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think LSU came into the season with like 69 players on scholarship.
They were already low, yes.
So, you're already talking about 15 under or 16 under the 85 limit. So, again, this is a difficult situation, obviously, and I think certainly LSU would have loved to have played this game in Baton Rouge this weekend had all things been, if they would have had a healthy team. But again, they've lost several players, I think. At least 4 we know that tested positive. Then the contact tracing certainly impacts that. So they had several others that put them under the limit that you mentioned. So again, the question to me is, will they be able to reschedule this game at some point? And right now, I think that's something that's being considered, but remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's listed as a postponement. The goal will be to play the game, but you bring up the big question: when? Yeah. December 12th was the open date for this type of situation, but that has already been taken when Florida couldn't play LSU earlier this season. So LSU is scheduled to play Florida in Gainesville on December the 12th already. Alabama, that's its bye week. Alabama plays Kentucky a week from Saturday at home, then the Iron Bowl at home on the 28th, and then scheduled to play at Arkansas on December the 5th. Obviously, if Alabama wins the SEC championship, they're scheduled to be in Atlanta on December the 19th. That's the SEC championship game. December 12th would be the likely date, Rod, but again, you'd have to move around the Florida LSU game. So I don't know. There's a possibility, I guess, that if the Mercedes-Benz Stadium is available on the 26th, that you could push the SEC championship game back a week. Maybe you could reschedule a Kentucky or an Arkansas and move that around. But from what I've been told, talking with somebody that I believe has a pretty good handle on this, the goal, Rodney, is to play the Alabama-LSU game at some point this season.
Yeah, and that's exactly the way I understand it, talking to different sources, Gary, than you've spoken with. And I think that's certainly the goal. Now, again, we go back to how are they going to make this happen? Obviously, several games could get reshuffled around the conference before it's all said and done. And the thing right now, everything we're discussing discussing is really speculation. It'll play itself out over the next few weeks.
But we're all disappointed. And you know, as a sportscaster and as Rodney running TiderInsider.com, you know, we're sick. I mean, we were looking forward to the game, 5 o'clock on CBS, national television, following the Masters. And, you know, we had gotten, I'm not going to say spoiled, but we had gotten into a rhythm of maybe thinking that Alabama's schedule was going to go off, you know, as scheduled. But it's not happening for very many teams in this league now. It's certainly not happening for Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Auburn, and Mississippi State. We've already, of course, had issues with Florida and Missouri and others. So it's just the reality of 2020. All right, now it's time for Coach Talk. Nick Saban knows the atmosphere that complacency can create on a football team, particularly when you've had some success. And he knows that to be consistent throughout the season, you have to avoid being complacent.
We said this before, you've heard it before, you know, complacency creates a blatant disregard for doing what's right. So, you know, that's something that our players are going to have to show maturity and understanding that it's not where you are right now, it's where you finish that counts. And if you're going to finish the right way, you need to continue to try to improve and do the things that we need to do to execute even more consistently on a week-to-week basis.
And Rodney, certainly to play consistent football, a lot of times you don't need this long of a layoff. Now the Alabama football team will be challenged after being out. Last week is scheduled. They'll practice this week, but no game on Saturday. That means they won't play again until a week from Saturday at home against Kentucky. How do you think Nick Saban and his coaching staff will deal with that?
Yeah, again, I think it's when you look at they played, what, 6 straight games, Gary?
Mm-hmm.
You have the week off. You have the opportunity to kind of get healthy. You had some guys. This was a really banged-up team going into that Mississippi State game. So I'm not really sure that this is a negative, because you look at it now, you've got Trey Sanders with his situation. He's now out, expected to be out for the season. You've got Waddle out. We've talked about that. And you're trying to develop the young players at those positions, possibly some freshman wide receivers, which we discussed last week. You're talking about a third running back now. Jace McClellan, Roydell Williams, Kyle Edwards. Those young players certainly need an opportunity to develop, and I think this extra week could maybe be beneficial to developing one of those guys in terms of allowing him an opportunity to play the following week.
That's a great point, Rodney. With a third running back now needed in that rotation, between those 3 freshmen, one gets an opportunity to step up and be that guy, and Alabama gets an extra week to try to develop one of those players. All right, we'll get back to football in our next segment and more on Trey Sanders. Right now, though, let's talk Alabama men's golf hosting the annual Jerry Pate Intercollegiate Tournament over at Old Overton this week. It started on Sunday, concluded this afternoon. Alabama had a good first round, but they fell back yesterday, and it wound up today being a 3-way tie between Auburn, Georgia, and Vanderbilt. All 3 of those teams finished 19 under par, and then Auburn won the event and the playoff. That stings, you know, if you're Alabama. Alabama has dominated this tournament throughout the years. 3 players for the Tide did play very well and placed in the top 20 overall. Alabama, though not as successful this year, but they had already won that big event up in Arkansas, so they'll be all right. They got a really good team. All right, still to come here on Tider Insider Television, Alabama soccer shut out its in-state rival on Friday night. We'll have details on how rare that has been to win down at Auburn. And our Crimson Tide running back, as we said, out indefinitely after a non-competition-related injury. We'll talk more about the Trey Sanders situation. How disappointing is that for him? And we'll be getting to your phone calls, emails, and tweets a little bit later on in the show. The phone number is 205-348-WVOA. That's 348-9882. There's the email address, or you could also tweet at us using the hashtag TITV. We'll be right back with the show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, Tider Insider TV. We'll return after this. Welcome back to Tider Insider Television. I'm Gary Harris, sitting across the studio from Tider Insider's Rodney Orr. Well, Alabama running back Trey Sanders is expected to miss the remainder of the season with injuries he suffered in an automobile accident. According to head coach Nick Saban, Sanders is out indefinitely. He was involved in a car accident near his home in Florida last Friday. Alabama, of course, was players were allowed to go home for the weekend. He missed the entire 2019 season with an ACL injury, but coming off the best game of his college career as he rushed for 80 yards on just 12 carries against Mississippi State. On Monday, during his weekly Zoom press conference, Alabama coach Nick Saban said that Sanders had successful surgery. That's the good news over at UAB. All right, Rodney, let's talk more about, and you already mentioned it a little bit, how this affects the depth on the team. Obviously, you've got Najee Harris and Brian Robinson, two great running backs, two seniors, but Trey Sanders had already kind of become that change of pace guy. And we saw with Robinson banged up against Mississippi State, his potential really starting to become unleashed. And now just when he's getting in a little bit of a groove, he's gone.
Yeah, really unfortunate. You know, again, last year he broke his foot in an August scrimmage type work at the end of a practice. It cost him the entire season, Gary. And he was a guy that Nick Saban said, look, as a true freshman, he was going to contribute significantly last year. And then she mentioned the progress he's made the last couple of games against Tennessee and then against Mississippi State. He looked like he was going to be that guy that gave Alabama that kind of that extra gear out on the edge, a guy that could really explode, make big plays. The fortunate thing, though, Gary, is, listen, he was involved in a serious car accident, suffered serious injuries, and, you know, he's alive. And I think that's the thing that really I want to focus on first and say very, very fortunate that, you know, Trey is, you know, certainly didn't suffer more injuries than he did, and that he is alive. So that's the promising and the great thing. And, you know, what happens now in his football future is hopefully he recovers fully, which he's expected to, and maybe next year he's back on the team. But as far as, you know, looking forward, we talked about those three true freshmen. You've got, obviously, Roydell Williams from Hueytown. Jace McClellan was an outstanding player in the state of Texas. Kyle Edwards, who hasn't played yet, but really was an outstanding player in the state of Louisiana last year. Three really outstanding high school players. You know, again, we'll see what kind of progress they can make, and if one of those guys can get on the field as that third back.
Also leaves a little bit of a hole in the kickoff return game. Obviously, Jalen Waddle was one of the guys back there. Then he gets lost for the season, and we saw Sanders on the kickoff return team against Mississippi State, so they'll have to keep looking for another guy there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we'll see how that all unfolds. And, you know, the one thing you do know, Gary, obviously Alabama has a lot of very talented guys that are very capable of returning kicks, so they'll find somebody.
Yeah, and the good news, as you said, is he's going to be okay. That's the main thing, is his health. Alabama football will be fine. All right, let's talk some soccer. Alabama did something this past Friday night. I didn't realize it had been this long. They won at Auburn for the first time since 1998. They beat the Tigers 1-0. Huge win over the 15th ranked Auburn team. It's Alabama's 6th victory over a ranked SEC opponent and the second on the road. So they will now go into the SEC tournament later this week down at Orange Beach with a little momentum. Riley Mattingly had a team-high 3 shots against the Tigers. Mattingly would also assist Felicia Knox in the only goal of the game in the 36th minute. Way to go, Alabama soccer. Well, still to come here on TITV, a notable former Alabama quarterback, you can probably figure out who it is, has got off to a fast start in his NFL career. And next, we'll be welcoming your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, there is the information on the screen on how you can reach us, 205-348-9882. So go ahead and give us a call now so you can get through. We'll be right back with more Tider Insider TV after this. Former Bama quarterback Tua Tagovailoa doing his thing in the NFL. You know, we didn't know if he'd play this year, but he got moved ahead of Ryan Fitzpatrick and got a win against the Rams and then against the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. He put on a show. Tua went 20 of 28 for 248 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also rushed 7 times for 35 yards and had a great scramble late in that game as the Dolphins won it 34-31. So, Rodney, Tua, I felt like at some point this season, if he were healthy, that was the main thing, that he would play. And even though the Dolphins were playing well with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's a quality player and a great veteran presence on that team, I think Brian Flores saw, hey, we've got more potential with Tua as the quarterback. And I think, obviously, that's why he's a head coach on an NFL team. He knows his team better than a lot of people do, and Tua's ready to go.
Boy, I tell you, Gary, getting that first start under his belt was really good for him. I think that when you looked at him in this game, he seemed a lot more comfortable, a lot more confident. He played really, really well. You know, I think on the game-winning drive, if I'm not mistaken, Gary, I think he was, 6 of 8 on that drive. Really performed well in the clutch. So that's something that when you look at a player that's only played in his second game on the road, you know, in that game-winning drive, the way he played clutch, that's pretty impressive.
And I might add little brother to Leah, as they're calling him, former Alabama quarterback, lighting it up for Mike Loxley in Maryland. So those Tagovailoas, they can play some quarterback. All right, let's head to the phone lines. And first up tonight, our pal Sammy up in Walker County. Hey, Sammy.
Hey, good, Rodney. the fan base, Alabama fan base, is looking for the knowledge, experience, and guidance to get us through this, and I know y'all guys possess all that. Y'all do a great job. I'd like to say something about the young players, Gary and Rodney. With respect to Will Anderson, he's been just outstanding, and if Timothy Smith is not in the rotation, he should be. But I think I got to give the go-ahead of the top vote to Malachi Moore. I think he's just been outstanding back in that secondary. I think he'll just get better and better. Thanks, guys. Great job.
Yeah, thank you, Sammy. And yeah, Malachi Moore has been the standout freshman on this team, and there are some good ones on offense and defense. But this is a guy who I don't know. I mean, I'm saying this because he makes a lot of plays. But, you know, Minkah Fitzpatrick was a great player. He's a great player now with the Pittsburgh Steelers, talking about guys in the NFL. Malachi Moore seems to have that ability, Rodney, to get around the ball, whether it's knocking the ball out or getting an interception. He's just flat out a playmaker. And Sammy's right. I mean, he's only going to get better. He's going to, you know, be a guy that could be an All-American down the road here.
Well, you just rarely see a guy come in, Gary, with the ability to kind of digest everything it takes to play in that secondary. Minkah did it. Minkah was not here early as an early enrollee. He came in the summer and, you know, performed really well very quickly. I think you look at Malachi Moore and the situation that they were in this year, no spring, kind of a similar situation, how quickly he grasps everything. And you're talking about making plays. Yeah, makes a ton of plays. He's always seems to be consistently in the right position, you know, to make plays, plays the ball well. Plays the man well. I mean, he's always in good position and coverage. So, yeah, he's done a fantastic job, Sammy. And I'm telling you, too, I think Brian Branch is another one to really keep an eye on. Number 14 back there. He's starting to play more and more. Very, very talented. He's going to be an outstanding player as well.
All right, let's get to an email real quick before we go to the break. Do you think LSU is afraid to play Alabama? Tommy from Northport. We kind of covered this a little bit earlier. Let me just say this. If you're on a team that's number one in the country, you're focused, you're dialed in. Maybe the LSU players are not as dialed in as Alabama. But I think players want to play the game. I had Harold Bishop on my radio show this morning, the former Central High School LSU and 7-year veteran in the National Football League. Players want to play. So if you're asking me, I think LSU's scared to play the game. No, I don't. Are they as dialed in as Alabama? Obviously, maybe not. Maybe that's why they went off and their players wound up getting COVID. But I don't think they're afraid to play the game. College football players aren't afraid to play, Rodney, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we mentioned this last week, Gary. I think obviously they've had some injuries. Their quarterback, Miles Brennan, out apparently for the year now. They played 2 true freshmen at that position. You know, they lost a ton from last year. You know, that's a beat-up football team. And I think it's fair to say, based on things that we've been told, you know, they've got a lot of internal issues in that program right now. But like you said, that doesn't mean they're afraid to play. I think certainly the players at LSU would have loved to have played this game.
All right, more phone calls and emails coming up on TITV. Dallas Cowboys rookie cornerback Trayvon Diggs could possibly miss the rest of the season with a broken foot. The rookie out of Alabama, number 27, was having a great year for Dallas. They love the guy, but he hurt his foot, fractured a bone late in the heartbreaking loss to the Steelers on Sunday, and could possibly be out for the season. We hope not. All right, welcome back into TITV. Gary Harris, Rodney Orr with you. And what are we doing here? We got to take a phone call? All right, let's get to the phone call. Who we got? It is Rick from Bluff Park. All right, Rick, you're on the air. Go ahead, my friend.
Hey, fellas, appreciate you taking my call. I'd like to ask about incoming wide receivers. We've had such a run of good luck with, or just plain out and out good skill wide receivers ever since Julio, and I mentioned this last week. But talk to me about any incoming freshmen for next year that we might have commitments from.
All right,
Thank
Rick.
you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, already off to a fast start in receiving receivers as far as recruiting is going, Rodney.
Yeah, you know, they started early in the summer, got Ajay Hall, an outstanding player out of the state of Florida. Actually, Rick, 3 of the top 4 receivers in the state of Florida are committed to Alabama, depending on what rankings you go by. But 3 of the top 4, when you talk about Ajay Hall, Ja'Cory Brooks, who's a 5-star player out of the Miami area, and Christian Leary, who's kind of that slot receiver, that tremendous speed, maybe the fastest receiver in the country, certainly one of the fastest. So right now they have 3 very, very talented guys. They're working on getting another one that's a highly rated player, Brian Thomas out of Louisiana. Some people have him a 5-star. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I had an assistant coach, Rodney, tell me one time, and I don't know if it's true, but he told me Florida speed is just different than any other kind of speed. Those guys, they really are fast, it seems like, down in Florida. All right, thanks for your phone calls and emails. Still to come, former Bama golfer Justin Thomas is gearing up for this year's Masters tournament, delayed until November. We'll have that story on a rainy evening here in Tuscaloosa. It's kind of pretty, though, isn't it? We'll be back after this. Former Bama golfer Justin Thomas paired with Brooks Koepka and Matt Fitzpatrick for the first 2 rounds of the Masters, which starts on Thursday. JT and his group will tee off that morning at 10:49 Central Time. He tied for 12th at the Masters last year and is coming off a second-place finish in the Zozo Championship. Go get him, JT. All right, I understand there's no game this weekend, but there would have been. So we're going to go ahead and do our predictions with an asterisk since there's no game, but we were ready to go. Rodney, had the game been played this weekend and Saturday, how would you have predicted it?
Well, I know this prediction can't be wrong, Gary. So, I really thought Alabama was positioned to blow LSU out. I think they've got a ton of problems down there at LSU. We mentioned a lot of them. We detailed them in this show. I had it 47-14 Alabama.
Yeah, Alabama wanted this one bad, and they remember what happened last year. I'm right there with you. I had it 45-17 Alabama in a blowout, and I think if they play later in the year, I still like Alabama to win it big. All right, that's what we think would have happened. It won't happen now. That's going to do it for the show, though. If you missed it, you can catch a replay tonight at 10:30. Or you can catch it anytime at WVUA23.com. We're going to leave you tonight with some former Bama players starring, as always, in the National Football League. Have a great night, everybody.